Ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ear.
Hi, this is your host Q, live and direct from Psyche Studio Kochi. Hope you all are having a good time. Welcome to the Groundbreakin, where we sit down with creatives, design and business pioneers to discuss their journeys, process and approach. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, consider subscribing. Also check out our website. We are working on a newsletter and a slowly growing design community on Discord, where we have weekly design live session every Saturday where we learn something new. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us ratings. It helps us reach a wider audience, and also because we are doing one episode a week. We always value feedback from our listeners, so feel free to get in touch with any comments or questions. You can shoot us a mail mentioned in the podcast description. For this episode, we have Hector Silva, aka Hectorius, the founder of Advanced Design and the host of the Context podcast. In our conversation, we delved into his journey in the design industry, from his beginnings in toy design to creating an impactful education space for the next generation of designers. We also talked about the importance of building a strong foundation in design education and the power of networking and community building in the field. Whether you are a seasoned professional or just starting out, there's something for everyone in this discussion. So sit back and stay tuned. Hello, Hector. How's it going with you?
Things are going great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you again. Thanks a lot for hopping onto the podcast. And I've been closely seeing your work and what you've been doing since my college days. So it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. What's happening, Hector? What time is it? Where are you?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, it's my pleasure. Well, what's happening is I'm based in Chicago, and spring is kind of coming to an end over here, and summer is trying to, tease us and the end of the academic year, and just planning out my summer plans and seeing, how to continue evolving what I'm doing with advanced design and offsite. So yeah, things are very interesting as we shift into different part of the year.
So this is going to be like the fourth year that you will be doing this?
This is actually the third year. We started in 2020, right? So this is about the third year that we're doing offsite.
All right, sounds great, and I think it's one of the and I think I've been seeing a lot of courses about UI UX and other graphic visual design, but there's something which is very it is very intriguing to me when you introduced it. I think it sounded like a great idea, and the collective you have for the cohort is just amazing. So yeah, congrats for that. All right, so. Let's just take a deep dive in your personal career, Hector. You always wanted to be a designer. You had an idea that you want to pursue this certain kind of a design.
Yeah, you know what? When I was a little kid, because I come from a really big family, and so I have a lot of influence from my older siblings. My older brother was really into art, and he really kind of pushed that onto me. And when I was a kid, like when you're a kid, you really are not as excited as because you just don't know what's best for you. You're just kind of a kid. But something that my older brother did must have clicked. And I just remember going to the museums with him and sitting there for hours trying to sketch statues and things like that. And, that stuff was boring to me when I was a kid. But as I got older, I started to, I was very creative and things like that, and would draw, and it was very influenced by the cartoons that I would see and stuff like that, whatever was on TV. And so when I went to high school, my parents lived pretty close to a performing arts high school. And so when I went to high school, I was like, okay, well, I know that I'm pretty creative and I like to draw. I'm going to apply to this high school. And I did. And that's where I found love essentially with design, because they offered, when you go to the high school, you have to select a major. And so I immediately fell in love with like art and design, sculpture. The major that I selected was set design. So they had a set design program there. And set design is essentially, the design of a set in a play or a TV show or a movie. And so the designers who do set designs usually dive into the technical aspect of, laying out a set design, reading a play, learning how to do makeup, learning how to design and prototype things and props. And so for me, it was like art and design and making and painting, and it was everything. And I immediately fell in love with it. And I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do when I go to university. So that was my first taste into design. It was through set design. It was pretty awesome.
And I can also see that even when you studied design, you, I think, kicked off your career with working around toys a lot. And I think a couple of places you worked where you were working around toy design. How did that happen?
Yeah, so after I left high school, I then went to university, and I went to university that had a set design program, because that was kind of what high school exposed me to. And when I got there, it was just completely different. Like when you go to high school, it is really fun because you're still like a kid. You're hanging out with all your high school friends. You're doing really cool stuff. It was high school art and design was like the type of art and design that we all appreciate, because there's no pressure in making work. There's no pressure, like you're just doing it and it's awesome and it's fun and you're doing really fun plays. When I got to university, things completely shifted, because university is another level of education, another tier. So things got very serious. The plays got really complicated, tough. You went from reading really fun plays to reading Shakespeare, and I'm just like, this is not at all what I want to do, or I immediately lost interest. It was kind of heartbreaking. But I knew, I'm like, okay, I want to do design. And so I spoke to my advisor at university, and they helped me figure out that, hey, there was this industrial design program on campus. And I shifted over to industrial design. It was a pretty organic move, just because there's so much overlapping, similarities. And within industrial design, I also started to determine, like, okay, industrial design is pretty big. And because I was very interested in making fun and very playful objects. I just felt like toy design it just came to me and very natural. I used my time at university to really build a portfolio and really like look into toy design and seek out, mentors and look at work online. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be on this journey to become a toy designer, even though my program didn't really, they didn't really emphasize toy design. It was very traditional industrial design. So I was on this journey by myself with a lot of help from friends from online and portfolios and just work that I would see online. And I just kind of, I didn't really have any formal training in toy design, so it was very hacked. Like I was like, okay, I'm just going to see what other toy designers are doing and follow in their footsteps. And I just kind of did what I could. And that's how I got into toy design after I graduated. I picked up the style of sketching toys. I picked up, a lot of things on my own. But essentially what really helped me get over this obstacle of not being traditionally trained in toy design was getting internships in toy design. So at the end of my junior year, I got an internship at Tomy, which is a really big Japanese brand. They have their U.S. headquarters is just outside of Chicago. And that really exposed me to really how toy designers work. And I learned so much there. Then after I graduated from university, I started getting all these toy design jobs from connections and networking. And that just continued, it helped me evolve my skill set and my interest into toy design. So it was pretty fun. It was really awesome. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started. It kind of started with set design, shifted into, industrial design, very little. And then toy design was what I kind of broke into industry. And then I graduated during the global recession, at the end of about a decade ago in the 2009, 2010. The global recession was raging and no one was hiring. So it was really tough. So I made a decision to, if I continue to be very niche in toy design, my job opportunities are also going to be very, very small. So I had to step back a little bit and kind of re-strategize and be like, okay, well, I did go to school for industrial design, so I know how to do industrial design, right? And I, catered my portfolio to have a more general industrial design feel and look. And so ever since that happened, yes, I can still do toy design, but I've also done housewares. I've also done packaging. I've also done, objects and a bunch of other things. Just because, if you are able to showcase that versatility, then you're able to then, get more jobs and have more clients. So that's kind of how it started.
It's really interesting. I think from the outside, I've always considered toy design industries as a very competitive industry. But it's like, I don't know. You have to think about a lot. You have to, put yourself into maybe kids' shoes if you're designing for kids, for example. So, and was it also like a gateway for you to, go into industrial design? Because I think, I still think that, even when I was studying and I came across people who were working around toy design, I found it very complex and, was it like there was like one process that you were following, or was it like interrelated and, every project has like a different process that you were following? Just curious to know about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. The process is pretty much the same, right? Like there's concept generation that you have to do. You have to do research. There's people on your team that do other things that kind of help you prototyping. I remember when I first started doing it as an intern, I had to watch. I was on the Thomas and Friends team. Thomas and Friends is this really cool train, I was on that team to design Thomas and Train stuff. And I remember when I first got my first internship, I spent a good week just watching the show because they were like, you have to watch the show. And I was like, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it in passing. I know what it is. I've seen videos of it online on YouTube, but then they're like, no, you have to watch the TV show. So I spent a lot of time just sitting there watching the TV show. And I was like, wow, okay, this is cool. And that was kind of awesome because it allowed you to pick up really small details that as a designer, you get to implement in the work. And it really, amplifies what you design. It was definitely, I understand why they do that, which is kind of fun. I would say that toy design and anything within the umbrella of industrial design, yes, they all have their unique kind of way of doing things. But I strongly believe that if you have a very strong foundation of design, if you understand the principles of design, if you understand, color and just how things are made and just general, very good foundation, you can design anything. So it doesn't matter whether it's toys or, transportation or packaging or whatever, because industrial design is really big, right? Consumer electronics, it's very big, especially now. But I'm a firm believer that an industrial designer can design anything they wish or they can, or they can be ambitious and even design buildings if they really, put their mind to it and they figure it out. I think if you just have a very strong foundation of design, and you've traveled, you're exposed to, principles of good design, you have an open mind, you can design anything you want. And with that attitude, that was kind of the attitude that I had when I was, quote unquote, I didn't know what I was doing when I was doing toy design on my own. I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, at least I tried. Right. So, yeah.
See, I think I've also seen that that as you mentioned that a lot of industrial designers, I mean, they are capable of doing anything. Do you think industrial design as a course, as a curriculum, teaches you things which helps you to even design, even learn parallel design processes? Do you think I've always, I was having a conversation with the band and we were talking about how industrial designer finds their way to other fields compared to other design fields. Do you think that's true?
To some extent, I think definitely. I think university, I think they try to do their best to teach you, these foundational methods. Some schools, some universities do it better than others. But I think there's still a lot to learn, especially now. There's just new methods of working, new emergent technologies, and I feel like a lot of universities are not integrating that, into what they teach on a foundational level. So they can definitely do better, but I think they definitely try for sure. I mean, it is a lot. It's a lot. The thing is, you have to teach someone these methods, but then the students then also have to validate the method by making, right? That's kind of where you learn a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah, and on the way you had it in mind that okay, maybe where I'm, where you were thriving, maybe it's not the best. It doesn't have like the best education system. And was that the reason that you kicked off, advanced design?
Yeah. So advanced design was born essentially. I'm going to be super honest. It was definitely born out of frustration, right? And when it comes to making something new, it always happens because you have a great idea, or you're like, hey, I think this could be better. As natural problem solvers, we're always looking at something and we're always trying to analyze it and determine this could be better. And this is how, right? And so for me, I had a little, I reflected a little bit on my own past, my own education. And I was like, wow, I learned a lot when I was working in industry. I wish I learned a lot from university. And I think they did the best that they could with the resources that they had. But was I prepared for industry? In my opinion, I don't think so. And then I went into industry and I learned so much. And even when I was doing my internship, I even questioned, why do I need to go back to school? Because I'm learning so much here. Why can't I just stay in industry? Why do I got to go back and graduate? Obviously, I went back and graduated because I was the first in my family to go to university. So I was like, okay, I need to kind of check this box. And kind of make my parents proud and things like that. But in retrospect, I just remember being an intern and I'm like, I'm learning just how fast I was learning in the 4 months that I interned versus the 3 years that I was at university. I was like, what? There's an imbalance here. What is going on? I need answers to my questions. So when, later, it was like 5 or 6 years later when I graduated school and I was already working in academia. I had already obtained my master's degree. I started asking these questions, at the school that I was teaching. Hey, this experience can be better. This education could be better. We can prepare students by doing this, this, and this, and this is how. And I was just hitting a wall and I was getting frustrated. And I was like, okay, well, this is very difficult. If no one's going to help me, I need to recruit and be around people who feel the same way. And that's how the nonprofit organization Advanced Design was born, because we were like, let's pour all of our energy and everything that we believe and let's make it formal. Let's start an organization with the emphasis of evolving and growing design education, making it accessible, providing resources, because when you think of education, at least here in the United States, it's pretty expensive. It's pretty expensive. It's pretty privileged. It's not accessible to everyone. I could tell you that I'm lucky, but also not lucky. Lucky that I was able to go to university and someone in high school helped me with the paperwork and all the logistic stuff that a 17 or an 18-year-old kid, just doesn't know what they're doing. But also unlucky because once I got to university, I didn't have money to pay for school. So then you have to get loans and then you graduate and then you have all the student debt and you're like, how did this happen? Right. So, it's so, with that in mind, with kind of reflecting on my own personal journey and as a student, I was like, we need to create something that's accessible and we need to provide it to the community so that people can benefit. And that's essentially how Advanced Design was born, out of this passion for making something better. And you know how it goes. You look at companies and you look at people who have created something new. It doesn't happen like, poof, oh, I have an idea. Maybe it does, but it usually happens out of frustration, right? It usually happens out of bad experience, or it happens, like the saying is frustration leads to innovation. So I very much believe that's kind of what happened with Advanced Design.
Yeah, makes sense. I agree with that frustration part for sure. And again, as a developing country, as a from this side of the world, we hear a lot about students load up with a lot of loans and things like that. And even in India, I think in the last podcast, I had a conversation with a creative founder who pursued and worked as an industrial designer in US, then came back to India and started his own design studio named Analogy Design. I don't know if you know. We had a conversation about why is everything wrong in this education industry, especially industrial design. Because I think still there's not much awareness, especially in a country like India, and I think it's a great scope that people are trying to build a community, and you have spaces like Context, for example. I think that was I started listening to that podcast maybe a few years back, and that was one of the reason I started a podcast, to be honest with you. So thanks for inspiring, Hector. Right, it's a full circle now. But when you were working as an industrial designer, and I'm sure that you had this constant thought of creating something like advanced design. So were you also keeping in mind that, okay, I need more people in the team, and and the kind of collective you have is like all the best players in the game, Spencer Nugent, so was it something that you manifested?
Yeah. So, I think something that I feel that I do quite well, and I feel like I picked this up in school and then in the industry and in graduate school, something that I feel that is really an asset to kind of how I work as a designer is making sure you're working with other people that are just smarter than you, have more experience than you, because I feed off of that, right? So I get around people that are usually more experienced, people that have done other things in other parts of industrial design. It doesn't make sense for me to be with someone that has a lot of similarities, because I'm like, oh, well, that's just a copy of me. So how am I going to get better? You get better by getting around people that are just smarter at you. They probably know other things that you don't. So it's a very classic Steve Jobs, if you're the smartest person in the room, that's not,
Yeah.
not, there's definitely a lot of red flags there. So for me, I knew that if I'm going to accomplish things, I need to be around people that are just doing amazing work. And that really, when advanced design was started, I immediately implemented that into the DNA of advanced design, getting around people that are just doing amazing work, that are doing different things that I can't do. And I feel like if I'm able to bring, create a collective of these talented people together, then there's definitely a chance that we can change the world, because we have a collective of all these kind of superpowers that I feel we're all very good at, and we all specialize. So yeah, absolutely.
As you mentioned that this cohort is pretty new. It's like maybe 3 year, or this is like the 3rd year. Before that, what were your initial executions that you did when you kicked off the advanced design, or you had a clear idea? Okay, that I'm this is my near goal. This is what I'm gonna do with the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. When we started advanced design, again, our vision was to create an organization that was going to provide educational resources. So we had events, free events. We started a conference that is now annual, that happens once a year. That's called Square One. We started doing outreach workshops, opportunities with high schools. So we would go into high schools, and we would even go into, middle schools to go and speak to 6th and 7th and 8th graders, kids in high schools. And we would go and talk about design and how it can be a career path, and, kind of planting the seeds. And we would do workshops with them where we would prototype, and they would kind of see the design process. And it was very exciting. We did a lot of stuff. We started the podcast as a means of education with it was just a different medium of education. So for us, we wanted to have different mediums so that people can consume education in different ways, right? So an event is an in-person, podcast is listening, we had the prototyping initiative, so that was making. So we just wanted, to create all these opportunities where it wasn't, where it was free and people would take advantage of. And we also went to a lot of universities. We traveled to different cities. We did we did so much. And I think subconsciously we knew in the back of our heads that eventually we would need to tackle some of the issues that were happening at university, where there was a lot of gaps, right? Like students are not prepared for industry, portfolios, work, skills. And I think subconsciously it was kind of building up back here. And we were like, and we just didn't know when it was going to happen. Because I think, all I knew as an educator, I'm like, it would be great, but that sounds like a lot of work. And so we weren't prepared. And the thing that really just pushed us to making it happen, unfortunately, was COVID, right? So COVID was this awful global pandemic that happened. And the silver lining was that it allowed us to develop this experimental online design school that we call Offsite. It pushed us into like, okay, we got to do something. And, COVID normalized video chats. It normalized Zoom, it normalized Google Meet, and unfortunately, it didn't really normalize Skype, but it normalized, yeah, it normalized us having these conversations. Without COVID, this podcast that you and I are having, it wouldn't happen. Like you would have to travel to me, I mean, it could happen, but the innovations behind the audio and everything, like it just would not, it wouldn't be the same. And so it normalized it. So for us, we're like, oh my God, if we just do an online version of this, we can then multiply our efforts, because now we're having students from all around the world. Location doesn't matter. And everyone's being educated. And now we're tripling our efforts of reaching to as many students as possible. Now we don't have to just stay in Chicago. We can go global. And that's kind of, again, it kind of started with a very small idea, probably a conversation back in 2018, something like, oh my God, it would be great if one day we have a school, right? And that led to me making some notes on a Google Doc and just quote unquote an I wish kind of list. Like, okay, one day if we have, $1 billion, I wish I could start a school, and here are the things. And it was kind of funny. But then when COVID happened, then things got very, very serious and very fast. And we're like, okay, wow, we're really doing this. And it just happened. And when we launched Offsite, we were very transparent. We told everyone who was a part of all the students, we're like, this is a pilot program. This is beta, right? So you're all guinea pigs here. We're experimenting, right? So be patient with us, because again, we know what we're doing, but we don't know what we're doing. So please have some patience. This is an experiment. They were prototyping this. That was 3 years ago. And it's been quite a wild ride, because it went from being an experiment. I feel like it's still an experiment because we continue to prototype things. But it's been amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things you made it sound very easy for sure. So I mean, starting out, I mean, constantly putting money, into the scene, and like how are you maybe getting that fund and even building trust? Because I'm sure it was not as easy as to go to a random college and talk about the design, or go to a real school and talk about what you're trying to do. So what were the processes you were following, or maybe the approach you had of building trust, and also constantly putting funds onto the table to actually make it work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you first start something, you have to talk about the value that you're bringing, right? You have to tell people what you're offering is going to benefit them, right? And especially with universities, a lot of faculty and educators got a little spooked, got a little scared, like, this is a competitive school. Why should we collaborate with you? And on the contrary, we were like, no, we're not the competitor. We are here to help you, help your students. And at the end, we all win. You win as a school, your students win, we win, and everyone helps each other out, right? And so we needed to, in order to build that trust, we needed to be very transparent about what we were doing, what we were offering, and then tell the students, this is the value that you're going to get. And the very first time we did Offsite, we didn't have any student work because, it was the first time we were doing Offsite. So what we did is we emphasized all the amazing work our instructors were doing. Hey, these are our instructors. They're professional industrial designers. This is what they're doing. These are their accomplishments. They are the ones who are going to teach you, right? So it was amplifying, the experience of our instructors, and really providing, kind of giving that to the community, telling the students to trust us, because your instructors are amazing. and you're going to learn so much, and this is their work. And so once we started to do that, students, kind of trusted us, and they jumped into our program. And then the more we did offsite, then we started to see results. Then we started to see the students actually, designed, and we started to see portfolios, and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So now when we promote offsite, we definitely promote the instructors, right? Because they are, an amazing group of designers. But we also promote our students, right? Because now we have work. Now we have, valid, now we have results and validation from students. And so, yeah, it begins with always like this is kind of going beyond offsite. Like whenever you start a company or a service, or you start an app or whatever it is, always be transparent and always communicate your value, because that's what people are seeking, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think, and also you also talk about building very strong foundation. So what like this approach is something that came a little later in your life, or you always had an idea, okay, that if I'm going to build something, I have to have like a strong foundation. Even I think, if I'm not wrong, it's written on your website as well.
That's right. Yeah, I think that goes back to just me as a person, right? Like I mentioned before, if you build a very strong foundation of industrial design, you can design anything. So for us, when we started offsite, we really wanted to include that in the DNA, because yes, we are teaching students how to be better designers. One thing that we also tend to do really good is we also teach students how to be good people, because you come to our program, you become part of our community, you leave our program, you become an alumni, then you're going to help our current students, right? So again, the efforts are tripled, because now we have more people helping. But not only that, you become an ambassador of our brand. You also become an ambassador of your own brand. And, industrial designing is a very small community. If you look at it from a global standpoint, like design is very small. And so we want to not only educate the best designers, but we also want to, have the best people design, right? Because it requires, in order to be a designer, you're solving problems that, and you're creating objects that people use. You need to have that empathy. You need to have some type of emotion. And if you are arrogant, and if you are, excuse my language, if you are an asshole, like, how are you going to care for others, right? If you're selfish. So for us, it's very important that, yes, we do teach you what is good design. You leave our program with amazing skills. You create relationships. You work with our mentors, but you also have to leave our program very selfless, and understand that, the world does not revolve around you, and always give back. So yeah, it's definitely like very much part of our DNA. Having a very strong foundation, and that means skills and human, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think you, if you are not, empathetic as a person, how are you even, building solution to masses, or, how can you, put real ideas into your product? And let's talk a little about the need of industrial design in the market. Because I think we are living in a digital age, as you mentioned, that in the last 2 years, there's so much innovation that's happened. And I personally I've come across a lot of people who started, who are industrial designers, but shifted to, digital products. And, why do you think people see a need, in the market of being an industrial designer? I don't know. This is like that I'm always curious about, because I don't know. I mean, it's like anything's making more plastic. I'm sure with your ideas and all, you can definitely eliminate a lot of with playing with the CMF and all. You can do a lot of things. Like, what's your take on?
No, yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think, well, first and foremost, in the last 5 years, I've seen design and I've seen objects just, the things that are being designed are just more thought out. They're beautiful, and there's more options, right? If I want to go get a chair or whatever, like, you have more variety. And so I think that's good, because I think design is getting better. There's always going to be more bad design than there is good design, just because it's cheaper, it's faster, right? And design is still pretty much exclusive, right? So you got to pay for that good design. I think the reason why there's a need for industrial designers is that, like I mentioned before, design is tiny compared to the rest of the world. Our discipline is super small. Maybe, I don't know, this math could be wrong, but maybe we make up 1% of the rest of the world is huge. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people that are jumping ship to UX and digital and all these other services and stuff, and that's fine. That just happens. But I feel like in the world, people are never ever going to shift away from physical objects. You travel to one of the most advanced cities in the world, and you're going to see services, you're going to see experiences, you're going to see objects, electronics, and yes, they're all going to evolve and they're all going to get better. And I'm hoping that as technology advances, our methods of using material advances, the way that we look at, how we care for our earth advances, all of that education advances. Absolutely, we will find ways to be sustainable. I am very optimistic. I know that, it will happen in my lifetime. But objects will never ever go away. It would take generations for that to happen. And I can tell you that the reason why they would just never ever go away is because, again, there's more, when we design things, we design for mainstream, we design for the masses. There's more people that have no idea about industrial design that use objects than people who know about industrial design, right? So, for example, like if I go down this rabbit hole of talking about, good design and all these designers, Johnny Ive, Mark Neeson, Ross Lovegrove, blah, blah, blah. If, again, only a very small population of the world will be like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Everyone else doesn't. Everyone else lives in the real world, and people use real objects in the real world. And so there's a necessity for us industrial designers to continue to design medical devices, objects, services, transportation. There will always be, and as technology advances, there's always going to be a need for that physical version of that. And I can tell you that, like, just right now, sitting at my desk in my office, about 10% of the objects that I'm surrounding myself with are objects from the past. So, like, from the 80s and the 90s. And that tells you that even objects from the past have a hard time leaving this world, because people tend to collect them. They tend to, there's nostalgia. People are like, oh my God, I remember this from my childhood. I need to have this, right? And so then there's this like big cycle of collection that happens. So there's always going to be a need for an industrial designer. And that need, as we continue to move into the future, our job is going to take us to so many places. We'll be able to do anything just because of how we think and how we operate. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of portfolios like coming from India. I can talk about the Indian portfolios. There's this notion going on that you have to have like a next level render thing, some next level 3D modeling should be there. And moving forward, I think a lot of these skills gonna become obsolete because of these AI tools that are coming up. And I've also been seeing that they've been emphasized on focusing on making amazing visuals. Even when I was starting, my main goal was to always make like amazing render, make it look nice, blah blah blah. So what's your take on that? How do you think we can balance that notion?
Yeah, I mean, these hard skills, right? Visualization, rendering, sketching, all that stuff, they're definitely great. They're necessary, but they're also skills that require muscle memory, which means that if I need to get better at rendering, I can teach myself how to do that, right? If I really wanted to focus and I'm like, okay, I need to get better at sketching, I can go and watch Spencer Nugent's YouTube page for hours. And if I focus, I can get better. So that's always, that's great because that's all muscle memory. As you see, you repeat, you do, right? Over and over again until you get better. What is really hard to do is train someone to become a good designer and understand design. Because I've also seen a lot of renders, a lot of sketches that are good, but the ideas are horrible, right? So it's, there's more of that than there is, again, kind of going back to that having a strong foundation. I would rather hire someone who understands design, understands and is able to articulate design and understands how things are made. And their rendering and their sketches are mediocre, but they're able to understand design and they're able to communicate ideas. Right? Because we can teach you those skills. We can teach you how to be a good designer, right? And that's something that we love to really push into our students at Offsite. You got to be a good designer. The sketching and all that stuff, we can teach you, right? You can learn that at a job. That's muscle memory. But if you are not that great at designing and you render bad design, it doesn't get you a lot of places, right? If you sketch an idea that's like the sketch itself is beautiful and it's amazing, but the idea sucks, you're kind of spinning your wheels, you're kind of wasting time. So it's about being good designer and being good at communication. So I would absolutely hire someone who understands those principles first. The skills could come later. We can always teach those skills. That's kind of how I feel. And then with AI happening, right? Again, AI is just another tool that you can use to accelerate your work, your process, but it cannot replace you because you as a person are one of one. You are authentic. You bring that value, that knowledge, that thought, those decisions. AI can't duplicate that, right? So, I see it as a tool, and if you know how to use it, fantastic. And if you don't know how to use it, definitely start to learn because it's kind of here to stay. So that's kind of how I look when I look at portfolios and I look at all these hot renderings and these key shot renderings. I'm like, okay, this is cool. In the past 2 weeks, I've been to 4 end of the year, design shows from universities. And there's a lot of students that have great work. There's a lot of students that flex, they have all these shiny renderings. I'm like, okay, let me look beyond that. Let me look at the actual work, at the objective. Let me look at the ideas. That's what I'm interested in because you're not going to fool someone with your shiny renderings. If your idea is bad, experienced designers will be like, that's not good, so.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it's also very important to constantly self-reflect in that case, I guess, as a designer because again, it's very, it has, I think, taken over a lot of portfolio that I've been seeing lately.
Right.
And do you think that it's going the same way in US as well?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all develops. I could tell you that with Offsite, we're always talking to industry. We're always talking to professionals. We have, people who are hiring. We're consistently evolving. Like, okay, how do we stay at the forefront of what's changing, what's coming, what's evolving, so that we can then prepare our students. So that's one way to stay ahead of emerging trends, right? It's always talking to people who are the designers responsible for establishing these trends, right? So an example, like a really big brand who establishes a trend in phones, like Apple, let's add a lens to our phone, and then all the other phone companies add 3 lens, 4 lens, or let's make this, etc. There's people who are the decision makers at that company. We need to talk to them to make sure that we are up to date with what's happening, so that our students are prepared, right? So, yeah, it's always being a couple steps ahead, so that you then can succeed.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, you are a designer yourself. You're someone who's coming from a creative background, and now, I think you are also managing a brand, a company, an organization. So, how you maybe balancing creative work and managing a business? I mean, so you call yourself a business person, entrepreneur, or just are you still creative? I mean, in terms of creating, I'm saying. Yeah.
For sure. No, absolutely not. Not a business person at all. I actually, I wish that the business end of things didn't exist and I was just able to do what I do. But again, you have to be around people that know business, accountants, people who can help you. And we definitely have that. The one thing that I do love to do, so I'm a very organized person and I love that attention to detail when it comes to organization, and things need to be clean and transparent and very organized. So when it comes to business, that's kind of what I bring to the table, and it makes other people's life easier. It allows them to manage what we do from a business end a lot easier, because I'm able to, and as a designer, I'm very much like that as well. I'm very, very detail oriented, all about organization. And I apply that to my work. So I definitely try to be as creative as possible. Like I live in this creative world. When I have to shift over to business stuff, I just do my best to be positive and optimistic. But there's some things that are not, doesn't get you excited, and you just have to be like, you're doing this for the best of the organization. You have to do this so that the organization can thrive and continue to exist. So yeah, there's some things, of course, that you just, even as an adult, you're like, I don't want to do this, taxes, things like that. But you think about the bigger picture. Why are you doing this, right? And then I'm able to kind of get over that hump. But yeah, definitely stay in the creative side.
Yeah, and how much do you think that talking about business of design? Do you think it's important for a designer to know the business side? Because I can give my example. So I've been a creative. I've done freelancing, and right now I'm at that space where I'm running a design agency, and every day I have to learn about the business side. So I constantly have to read a lot of material and things like that. How do you think, as an individual, as a creative, as a designer, how knowledge about business, reflects in your work, or maybe gives you an edge, or maybe it's not important?
Yeah, I definitely think it is important. We teach the business of design in offsite because we want our students to have a seat at the table. So I think as a designer, yes, you have to do designing. You have to know the skill you need to do. You need to execute design. But I feel like that's not enough. Design design is whenever you want to get something to the market, whenever you want to get something on the shelf of a store, that requires knowledge of the business of design. So I think it definitely, it gives you an advantage to know how things operate, that the world doesn't revolve around design, that there's people who make decisions, investments in regards to businesses, engineering, marketing, all of these people, all of these different teams and disciplines all play a role in bringing your idea to life, right? So your idea, whether it be a sketch and then making it physical, right? And then putting it at the store, that requires a ton of people and it requires a lot of business, transactions, interactions, etc. Manufacturing, all of that is all business. And so if you know how the world operates, how the business end of design work, you will definitely have a huge advantage because you'll be able to speak this common language with other people. Not a lot of people could speak design. A lot of people speak business. So as a designer, you got to put yourself in that situation because on a global scale, it's going to put you in a position where you can get a lot of your ideas out into market a lot faster, a lot easier, a lot smoother. Right. So it's the same thing. It's the same concept of, should I understand how things are made in manufacturing? Yeah, absolutely. Because it allows you to speak with engineers. It puts yourself in their world. And now you're able to actually solve solutions that you probably can't do without an engineer. Right. And it allows you to understand, okay, because once you create an idea, like your job doesn't stop there. Like if you really want to follow through, there's a lot of logistics, a lot of things that happen, supply chain, a bunch of things. And you know about business and you understand that, huge advantage for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Is there a way to put that in your portfolio? Yeah, I'm sure there is. There's ways to talk about the life of an object that you designed and how, it can go into market in a portfolio. Yeah, for sure. But all of that's going to come out when you start to get interviewed, when you start talking to people, integrating that into your dialogue with others. People are going to be like, wow, this person knows about business, right? That's going to be extremely impressive and very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So this might sound like a personal question to you, Hector. I think even in our last chat, when we were on a call, you mentioned that you pick up one thing and go all out with that. So that perseverance, and that attitude, how have you maybe built that attitude? Is it the part of your upbringing, or maybe you built it on the way?
Yeah, that's definitely part of my upbringing. I'm like I mentioned, I have a big family. I'm one of 6 siblings, right? So it's very competitive. Some of my younger siblings are athletes, so very competitive. We compete about the most random things, really dumb stuff. And there's a lot of things that you learn with being around big family. You learned perseverance. You learn that failing is normal and okay. And it's just part of your process of learning and understanding. And so, yeah, that's definitely part of my upbringing. It's also part of my parents' journey to America because they're immigrants who came here and they had to persevere a lot, right? They had to go through a bunch of things. So I think just getting that from them. And I think, yeah, as a designer, now you add the creative aspect of it. And, with design, there's a craft to it, right? So you're going to do something, you're going to do it very well, right? Especially if it's your work and you're going to put it out into the world, you want to go above and beyond. As a designer, I look at the world in a very 360-degree way. Well, first I look at things in an orthographic view, and then I turn them in my head, right? It's almost like like a CAD model in my head. But when you're designing something, you want to look at all the fine detail. You want to zoom in to, the smallest millimeters of radiuses. And you, again, you kind of want to design in a way that, you don't leave anything, to doubt or for assumption. So, yeah, it's definitely part of my upbringing that has now become part of my regular process. And I think even in the last 2 years, have gotten bad news from clients and work and things like that. And, anytime you fail and you get pushed back, you then get back up and you make a comeback. So you got to keep pushing them. Because if you don't, I don't want to know what the alternative is. That's all. So I don't want to know what happens if you don't, right? And so for me, it motivates me to keep going and keep persevering for sure.
Yeah. Kudos to you, Hector. So I mean, I think that you published like almost 100 episodes, 100 podcast episodes. Where are we, or are we expecting season 2 of some sort? There's something about that.
Yeah. So context. Yeah, we had to take a break a little bit just because we did 100 episodes, and it gets exhaustive, like talking to people and things like that. I mean, you're doing this, like it definitely requires a lot of work to edit and stuff like that. And so the last episode I think we did was maybe like a year and a half ago. And we were like, let's take a break. Let's focus on offside. We'll take a break. But I've been speaking, I've been recording, I've been interviewing people without publishing, like I think probably like once every other month. So probably like 6 people a year. I've been, because there's obviously interesting people and people like, I'm like, yeah, I have a list of people I would love to talk to, and I still hit them up. The only thing that sucks is that they ask me, hey, when is this going to get published? I'm like, let me get back to you. But we are officially like taking a break, and we're planning on restarting things this summer with a new format, a new way of doing things. We were just kind of taking a break to perhaps plan it out and see how we can bring a different energy and bring other people and maybe have a co-host. And, so there's just a lot of things we're experimenting with. But yeah, I'll be back soon.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it, Hector. So, I mean, this takes us to the last question I usually ask. Where are you taking advanced design to? What are we expecting? What's your goals with offsite, context, advanced design as an organization?
Yeah. So I think one of the goals for what we want to do is, so right now we thrive on this online hybrid, platform. And I feel like hybrid and online it's here to stay. It's not going to go away because it allows us that accessibility to other people. It allows us to do a lot of things a lot faster. But we would love to do offsite, like a physical version of it, build our own, like when we were talking about starting a school, let's look at that and actually start a school in person. And I'll obviously start small and then prototype it and then grow it. So we definitely want to, test that out. Again, the online stuff will always be here and we'll find ways to integrate it. But the in-person is something that also you can't not have, especially in design. Like you teach in person, you're around other people, that community, that culture. It's pretty amazing. And so we want to test that and we want to do it. And, having an actual school is something that we're going to start to prototype come 2024. So that's something that we look forward to and something that we are going to start planning very soon. So yeah, we've been kind of, laying pretty low with some of these ideas, but with anything, you kind of take baby steps and then you kind of just test it out. But yeah, that's kind of our plan for, I think, the next 5 years is a physical version of Offsite. Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds like a very exciting plan, and I wish you all the best for that, Hector. And thanks again for hopping onto the podcast. I got to learn so much, and have a great time.
Thank you so much for inviting me on here. It was a pleasure. It's an honor. Best of luck with you, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Yeah, groundbreaking.